From Houston, Texas, to the four corners of the world. From urban to foreign missions. From inner city to unreached people groups. Since 1981, Turning Point Ministries has been preparing a people for the coming of the Lord with a message of consecration, commitment, and action. What started as a handful of young people handing out business cards on the streets of Houston and a Bible study in Doug Stringer's workout studio has now become an international movement that has impacted cities and communities around the globe. As Doug and others began leading people to Jesus, he would take them into his home. At one time, he was hosting 17 people who were living in his apartment. Other individuals began offering their homes to use as well. Many lives were changed, and many young believers were nurtured during this time. In 1983, the ministry began outreaches at rock concerts and clubs. Gospel literature was distributed, and many young people received prayer. During one of the Jericho marches around a concert arena called the Summit, the group paused for prayer and asked God to someday use that facility for His glory. Today, that same facility is the home of Lakewood Church. During this time, Doug met the late Dr. Edwin Lewis Cole, founder of the Christian Men's Network, and served as Dr. Cole's National Young Adult Coordinator. Dr. Cole's influence would not only impact Doug's life, but many others for years to come. The first of 10 annual Evangelism Spiritual Impact Conferences was held in 1986 as inner-city, evangelistic, and discipleship ministries came together to share citywide outreach strategies. The Montrose area of Houston, known at that time to have the highest crime rate in the state of Texas, was targeted for weekly street ministry. It was a concentrated center of decadence and perversion.
Some of them are kids that are runaways or have been kicked out of their homes. They have nowhere to go. So they come out here and they prostitute and they do drugs.
Addicts, prostitutes, and runaways were fed, clothed, and placed into homes as inner-city ministries worked together to share the love of Christ. Outreaches continued with beach blitzes in Galveston and street ministry in Houston. The ministry's influence expanded throughout the city as Houston churches joined together for the first Jericho Drive.
God called a few of us pastors together to actually drive around the city of Houston 7 times. We called it a Jericho Drive. And afterwards had a Shout of Victory rally where we crossed racial and denominational lines to come together with a higher purpose.
And Doug Stringer ministered internationally to the underground church in Vietnam, while accompanying a group of veterans who returned there for healing. Gabby Saltao, who served in the ministry throughout the 90s, shared her experiences as a Turning Point Ministry staff member.
On October 19th, 1986, I received Jesus in my life and got born again. I felt that God had put a call on my life, and even though I had no idea what all He had in store for me, I knew that I wanted to preach the gospel. In 1990, I ventured out on my first mission trip to Mexico and Belize. I participated in Christmas outreaches and loved going to the streets and talking and ministering to the kids late at night, which I did for the next 3 years. 1993, I received my green card. I'm now officially an American resident, and Bill, Kenny, Isaiah, and Johnny come into our lives. All are coming out of the homosexual lifestyle, and all are infected with the AIDS virus. I write their testimonies for the Ambassador Report, and Terry Hester said it was one of the most powerful ones we ever published. Isaiah's already very sick. Doug baptizes him in May, and John takes him into his apartment. The official beginning of our unofficial AIDS ministry. John, very sick with AIDS already himself, selflessly nurses Isaiah until he goes to be with Jesus on August 15, 1993. 3 months later, on November 27, 1993, Bill passes away. One of my best memories with Bill is the prayer retreat we did at his house with Doug Troxel, Lois, the Kettner, Sammy, Kurt Hesse, and many others. Bud and I lose a wonderful friend in Bill. I continue to be in and out of hospitals visiting with my friends that I love so much. These were some of my most powerful years in the ministry. I saw the love and power of God in action. John shares at the Spiritual Impact Conference, and the entire ballroom is in tears. He's hanging on to life, and on June 20th, 1994, after a brave battle, Jesus takes John home. I lose one of my best friends. Only 6 weeks later, on July 25, Johnny's going home to Jesus. They all leave behind an emptiness in my life, but life and ministry goes on. 1997. Pam and George off to Asia, and Valenzas off to Peru. The nest is definitely stirred up. 1998. Prayer Mountain reunion. Doug asked me to preach. I don't believe what I'm hearing. I was so honored and overwhelmed by the offer, and preach on burying one's dreams in January. Little did I know how prophetic that was for my own life later on. I went on my most adventurous mission trip ever. Indonesia, Malaysia, and then on to Munich. I literally circled the globe once. Thank you for letting me grow, blossom, and bloom, and for pruning me, but not clipping my wings.
Many people considered Prayer Mountain to be one of the most pivotal events in the spiritual climate of the city of Houston. Thousands of individuals and hundreds of churches came together to participate in 40 days of fasting, prayer, and worship, hosted by Turning Point Ministries International during the last 40 days of 1996. Even today, individuals all over the city continue to say, Prayer Mountain changed my life.
Houston Prayer Mountain. 40 days, but I believe what God does in this 40 days is going to last for eternity. And every night we're seeing all these pastors and ministry leaders coming from every race and denomination. That is unprecedented in Houston. Just with the Somebody Cares project, over 200 pastors are working together now. That's a miracle in itself.
As the 1990s came to an end and we moved into the new millennium, Somebody Cares Houston had already impacted thousands of lives through billboard campaigns, youth camps, a strategic prayer initiative called Occupy the Land, monthly pastors' meetings, gang prevention, and youth guidance consultants, Holiday of Hope, X Day at the Bay, and other youth outreaches, as well as citywide baptism.
Everybody's unifying and coming together. See, the enemy don't want that. So when God brings us together, we're more powerful when we unify as a bond, as a different nationalities. When we bond together like that, we become a powerhouse for Jesus, and we tear the enemy's camp straight down to the ground.
Participating churches distributed 50,000 Somebody Cares Houston New Testaments, 1 million prayer door hangers, and 500,000 copies of the Book of Hope. Individual lives receive daily ministry with food, clothing, blankets, school supplies, and other assistance. And yet, this was only the beginning. As others began to see what God can do when the churches of a community come together, they began to replicate Doug Stringer's message of unity with a purpose. The first Somebody Cares America chapter outside of Houston began in Tampa Bay in 1997. Later that year, Somebody Cares answered a cry for help from Indonesia and mobilized the Somebody Care Network to take relief to a land of great despair. Doug and a team from Houston traveled there to minister, and Somebody Cares Indonesia was born. And while there, the Indonesian president publicly endorsed the work of Somebody Cares. By the early 2000s, Somebody Cares had expanded to various locations in New England, Pennsylvania, New York, Denver, and several locations across Texas, as well as new international operations in Scotland, Fiji, Kenya, and Brazil. Today, Somebody Cares operates in cities and communities across the nation and internationally as churches, ministries, individuals, and businesses labor together to be a tangible expression of Christ to individuals in personal crisis, as well as in times of corporate crisis, as we saw in 2005 with the Indian Ocean tsunami and Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. Turning Point Ministries continues to work locally and globally through Roots of Christianity character classes, prayer initiatives, men's ministries, and missionaries throughout the world. Doug Stringer has become an internationally known author and communicator, traveling extensively to bring a message of hope to the hurting and strength to the weary. His willingness to go wherever God sends has led him from praying with the poor in garbage dumps to the palaces of government leaders. His ministry spans the globe, touching nearly every continent and encompassing many cities and nations, from Hollywood to disaster relief summits in Washington, from Africa to Europe to the South Pacific. Doug Stringer and many others who are part of this ministry throughout the nations and around the world have spoken to thousands and ministered to people at all levels of influence. When all is said and done, and at the end of the day, the core of the ministry has not changed in 25 years. It's all about people.